If you're looking for the best beginner camera for video this year, you have quite a few options. Here at Think Media, we have tested over 100 different cameras, but right now there are 7 cameras that stand out in our mind as the best options for beginners. They range in price from about $500 up to $1,000, and in this video, we'll talk about the pros and cons for going for each one of these cameras and which one might be the best option for you.
You gotta just press record.
So the first camera on our list is the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. We have absolutely adored this camera at Think Media over the last year, and there's a lot of great things about this camera, starting with the fact that, in our opinion, this is honestly the perfect vlogging camera. If you're on the hunt for the best vlogging camera, I honestly wouldn't look any further. You don't even need to keep watching this video. None of the other cameras on our list are a better vlogging camera than the Pocket 3. This thing is outstanding for vloggers. It's just so easy to use for both beginners and professionals alike. If you are a beginner, just leave the camera in auto video mode and your results are going to look amazing straight out of the camera. And if you're a professional and you want to tap into some of this camera's higher end features, there's a lot of advanced features you can leverage, like manual video exposure if you want to manually set your settings like shutter speed and ISO. There's also the ability to adjust your white balance for different color scenes. And you can also shoot in the D-Log-M profile for retaining the most color and exposure information out of your camera. This thing is just honestly a beast even for professional video creators. My favorite feature by far though is the active track mode, where the camera can literally track your face wherever you're at in the frame. This thing is honestly crazy, and it's actually the #1 reason why I recommend people buy this is because of this distinct feature. This kind of just gives you a little camera assistant in your pocket. So I know for me, a lot of times I like to go out and I'll have my wife help me shoot videos, or a friend who's a videographer or something, and I'll give them a camera and they'll record me and take B-roll of me. But a lot of people don't have that luxury to have somebody who's a creative who can make content for them. But with the DJI Pocket 3, you're able just to go set this thing. I often set it on like a bench or even just on the ground if I'm wanting to get a wide shot or like sort of a creative talking head style shot, and it's going to track you perfectly in the frame, no problem. You could also turn this feature on in your studio environment or in a webcam live stream scenario, and rest assured knowing that no matter where you move in the frame, your camera's always going to track you to make sure that you're in an optimal position. The Pocket 3 can shoot in so many different resolutions and frame rates, up to 60 frames per second in 4K resolution, and the image quality honestly looks incredible for how tiny this camera is. Every time I take this camera out vlogging or using it as a B-roll camera, I love the images that the Pocket 3 can produce. If you ever need to step away from the Pocket 3, you can actually monitor your video signal from your camera using the DJI Mimo app. So this is a really cool app that's free from DJI. And you can also, with this app, add some additional effects to your video signal. Some of these effects are ridiculous and I would never use them, but some people actually might find them beneficial. So you can check out those effects in the app as well. There's a USB-C port on the Pocket 3 as well that can support a webcam feature. So you can use this as a 1080p webcam, which is really cool. Or you can input other USB-C audio devices, such as audio interfaces or microphones that are USB-C, to improve the audio quality that's going into your DJI Pocket 3. And it also has a built-in audio receiver to receive audio from the DJI Mic 2 system. So your audio needs are covered no matter what you want to do with the Pocket 3. And then of course, there's a really cool feature where you can flip the screen from horizontal to vertical mode to instantly switch between horizontal and vertical aspect ratio shooting. So this is perfect for people who do a lot of social media content and YouTube content, and you're sort of bouncing back and forth between these different resolution formats. So for YouTube, obviously a lot of what we do here at Think Media is widescreen, but if we're making YouTube shorts or Instagram Reels or TikToks, we obviously like to shoot in vertical format when we can. And the Pocket 3 makes this so easy to do just by twisting and rotating the screen. Now, the only drawbacks with the Pocket 3 would be that it is a smaller sensor size. So if you are worried about being in low light situations and you're somebody who often films outdoors at night or in lower light indoor environments, you might see your image quality suffer with the Pocket 3 just because it has a tinier sensor. I took this to a museum with my family though, and honestly was really surprised at how well it performed in these lower light situations. And it's also kind of an unusual form factor or like shooting experience, because a lot of these cameras that we'll talk about in this video leverage kind of the traditional DSLR or mirrorless style camera format where you would shoot with 2 hands, and it's a more typical experience of shooting with a camera. But the Pocket 3 is more like using some sort of like selfie stick or something. So it could feel like a little bit of a learning curve at the beginning as you start using this. But if you just give it a few days or a week, I bet you're going to really love your experience of shooting with the Pocket 3, because that was my experience. Overall, this is an outstanding value. It's about $519 for the camera itself, or around $670 for the creator combo, which we highly recommend. I love all the accessories that come in the creator combo, and we'll link that down in the description below. Now, the next camera on our list is from Nikon, and Nikon hasn't historically been known as a company that focuses so much on the video aspects of their cameras, but lately they have been killing it in providing users with really high quality video options. So Nikon's current entry-level mirrorless camera is the Nikon Z30, and there's a lot of benefits for going with this camera, especially if you're a Nikon user. The Nikon Z30 retails for $607, which is a pretty weird price point. It's not like a round number, which I think is weird, and that's for body only, but when you stack that price point up against the other cameras on our list, that's actually a pretty competitive price. The first thing that I love about the Z30 is its stabilization. This thing has an incredible image stabilization built into the camera, especially when you enter into the sport mode, which is sort of like the active stabilization mode of the Z30. What's so cool about the Z30 is it doesn't have a big crop like a lot of the other cameras have when you put them in their best stabilization setting. You keep the same field of view when you enter into that stabilization mode, so this is going to be great for content creators and vloggers who want stable footage but don't want to sacrifice the focal length that they're typically shooting at. For video results, you get 4K up to 30 frames per second and 1080p up to 120 FPS, and that's pretty common for this range of cameras right now that we're talking about in this video. The video quality on the Z30 honestly looks really good. I remember back in the day, I used to shoot on Nikon camera systems, and I would shoot on like the Nikon D7000 or the D500, some of these other crop sensor cameras from Nikon that they produced many, many years ago, and the video quality just looked awful on those cameras. So Nikon has come a long way in providing users a better video experience out of their cameras. We also get really good autofocus performance with both eye autofocus tracking and face autofocus tracking. I will say it is a little less snappy than Sony and Canon's autofocus, but all things considered, it is really good and totally usable for a YouTube studio environment or vlogging out in the streets. The Z30 has a 21 megapixel sensor, so you're going to get really good photo performance out of this camera as well. So if you're a photographer and want sort of a hybrid style camera, the Z30 could be a really good option. I also love the design and the feel of the Z30. It's got a really deep and large grip, which feels really good in the hand. Unlike some of the other cameras that we'll talk about in our list, I think this is one of my favorite form factors out of a compact mirrorless style camera that I've seen in a long time. You also get some cool features like some extra function buttons over by the lens mount, which is really helpful to map some different functions to. You get a physical switch on the dial to switch from video to photo mode, which is cool. You get a tally light on the front of the camera to let you know if you're recording video, and the touch screen interface is fully operational. So you can touch the screen to set your autofocus point as well as have full menu control via the touch screen on the back. And the screen is a fully articulating flip screen, so this is great for vloggers out there or for people who want to shoot YouTube style videos like this one, but you don't want to purchase an external monitor. This screen can flip towards you and you're able to see yourself while you're recording video, which can save you a lot of money. Now, the Nikon Z30 does not have a viewfinder, so if you're a photographer out there, you might be looking for a viewfinder. This might not be the camera for you if that's the case, but the fact that they did remove the viewfinder made this camera more compact, which a lot of people might prefer over having the viewfinder. You also don't get a headphone jack to monitor audio, which could be a deal breaker for more professional video shooters. If you want to real-time monitor your audio signal, that could be a deal breaker because sometimes it's really good to hear what kind of audio you're recording in the moment. The sensor in this camera can only shoot 8-bit color as well, so all that really means is it's not going to give you as wide of range as colors to work with in post-production. For a lot of people, this won't make much of a difference, but if you're wanting to move into more professional video situations later down the road, this camera might suffer a little bit depending on what type of content you're wanting to shoot. Overall, this is a really good camera, especially for those of you who are familiar with Nikon cameras already, and if you want to stay in that Nikon ecosystem, this is a great everyday camera for content creators. And I will say this, I'd honestly keep an eye out for what Nikon is going to do in the future because they just recently purchased the camera company Red, who makes high-level cinema cameras. So obviously they're in touch with what's happening in the video space. So I won't be surprised if we see some really awesome video features coming out of their latest Nikon series cameras. The next camera on our list is the Canon EOS R50, which is Canon's second cheapest mirrorless camera that they make right now behind the R100, which we're not talking about the R100 in this video because it has some serious limitations for video shooters. It's a decent camera, but the R50 is really what we'd recommend as the baseline entry-level video camera from Canon's ecosystem right now. It was released back in 2023 and retails right now for $629 for the body only. In a lot of ways, the R50 is very similar to the Nikon Z30, and honestly, a lot of these cameras are really similar to each other, but there are some key differences with the R50, including you get a viewfinder with the R50. So you photographers out there are going to love this. if you're a photographer shooter or even a video shooter, sometimes it's helpful to be able to look through the viewfinder if it's a really bright sunny day and the sun is shining directly on your screen. It can get tricky to see your composition and make sure that your exposure is correct. So the viewfinder can be a really helpful tool in those kinds of situations. I'd also say that the autofocus performance of the R50 is a little bit better than the Nikon Z30, but it's still not as good as Sony's autofocus system. Sony just has autofocus on lock right now. With the R50, you get a 24 megapixel sensor, which is a really high quality sensor, and you can shoot 4K video up to 30 frames per second or 1080p up to 120 FPS. Now with that sensor, again, you're only able to shoot in 8-bit color, but it does let you shoot in a 10-bit color mode when you shoot in the HDR PQ mode. And in this mode, you're able to shoot in sort of like an HDR profile, but you're gonna have to do some serious color grading and even some like color space conversions away from HDR to make it look more natural. Overall though, it can produce a better image because it is 10-bit color, but most people will be fine with the standard 8-bit color that this camera produces, and you're getting that beautiful Canon color that Canon is typically known for. People love the way that Canon cameras look straight out of camera, and this camera is no exception. You again get a fully flip out screen that's also touch enabled, so you can touch the screen to focus or even navigate the menu system. And you also get a pop-up flash. So in addition to the viewfinder, you get a flash unit as well. So this could be a really good camera for people who are hybrid shooters. So if you're a photographer and a video connoisseur, you might like the fact that this does have a viewfinder and a pop-up flash. But it's not all good things with the R50 because first and foremost, there's actually a 1-hour record limit with this camera in 4K resolution. So no matter what happens with this camera, you can only shoot in 4K for 1 hour. And I think Canon did this because it knows that this camera has some limitations. And if it allowed you to shoot longer than 1 hour, a lot of problems would occur. People would be overheating their cameras, overheating their sensors, and it would just be no good for anybody. So they instituted a 1-hour record limit for 4K video. But the crazy thing about that is oftentimes it actually overheats before it even gets to that point. And in our experience, in our testing, we typically found that around 40 minutes in 24 frames per second in 4K is when this camera would overheat, and then around like 30 minutes in 4K at 30 FPS. So this is not going to give you very long record time. So if you're somebody who needs to shoot like long form video podcasts, or even the video that I'm literally filming right now, I'm probably going to film all this A-roll for about an hour. This camera would not be able to handle that. I would have to sort of stop recording and then hit record again, let the camera cool down. So there's workarounds and there's ways that you can make it work. But typically, I would not want to go for a camera like this if I did long form video recordings. If you're somebody who has really large hands as well, you're not going to love this camera. I have pretty like moderately or even kind of like small hands. And this camera just feels so tiny, and I just don't love the way it feels in the hand. It's definitely my least favorite feeling camera of all of the cameras in our list. So that's just something to be aware of. If you have smaller hands than I do though, you might think it's fine. And also again, you get no headphone jack to monitor audio. So I don't know what it is about these cheaper cameras, but they don't give you a headphone jack. I think it's kind of weird, but it's just something you want to know. Overall, it's a really good entry-level mirrorless camera, especially if you like Canon's color science for video and you don't mind the smaller body design. You're going to be able to get really good results for video and photo quality. As long as you're okay not being able to record longer clips in 4K resolution, this could be a great camera for you. The next camera on our list is the original Sony ZV-E10. This camera retails for $698 right now, but it's also often on sale. And actually right now at the time of recording this video, it just went on sale for $598. And that typically happens around the holiday seasons or on Amazon's Prime Day sales. You often can get this camera for quite a good deal. And all day long, actually, you can buy these used on Facebook Marketplace or eBay for around $500 to $550. So this is getting really down there in price point, and that's because it was released all the way back in 2021. So there are a lot of used options on the camera market, and this is one of Sony's best-selling cameras of all time, so they're readily available from used sellers. Frankly, this camera has a lot of the same specs as the Canon R50 and the Nikon Z30. You can shoot up to 4K resolution at 30 frames per second and 1080p up to 120 FPS. So notice the trend here, these cameras all shoot similar frame rates and resolutions. You also get really good colors straight out of camera with no picture profiles. I love the way this camera looks straight out of camera. It honestly doesn't need very much editing and post-production if you just shoot with the standard picture profile. With this camera, you get really good autofocus performance for both photo and video shooters. So you never really have to worry about going out of focus when you shoot with the ZV-E10. And that's really one of the main benefits of even going with Sony in the first place. With this camera, they also finally gave us a headphone jack as well, so you can monitor your audio signals. So thank you, Sony, for doing that with one of your baseline cameras. It's great that you did that. The ZV-E10 is limited to 8-bit color as well, but they do give you the option to shoot in some different picture profiles like Sony's S-Log3 or S-Log2 picture profiles to retain the highest dynamic range of any given scene. You're also still on the older menu system, which some people like, some people don't like of these Sony cameras. It's just something to be aware of that Sony's newer cameras have a different menu system. And you're on the older battery. This battery is super old. So this is the NPF W50 batteries from Sony, and these things do not last long at all. The newer Sony batteries are way better, and if I go out with my ZV-E10, I have to take like 7 batteries with me if I'm gonna shoot for a full day. So battery performance, not great on the ZV-E10. And also the camera's touchscreen capabilities are only limited to autofocus. So you can just touch the back of the screen to select an autofocus point, but you can't use the touchscreen to navigate the menu system, which is really unfortunate. And overall, the ZV-E10 is one of our highest recommended cameras of all time here at Think Media. And all around, it's just a really good camera. It's pretty good at everything. And as I look at these 3 cameras right here, the Canon R50, the Nikon Z30, and the Sony ZV-E10, honestly, these are really similar cameras. They're just in their own ecosystem, sort of. So if you're a Canon shooter, you're going to want to go with the R50. If you're a Nikon shooter, Z30, Sony, ZV-E10, these are sort of the baseline entry-level cameras, and all of them honestly perform really well. Now, there are a few more cameras we want to talk about that are a little bit more mid-tier, but they're still under that $1,000 price range. The first would be the Canon R10. So this is Canon's mid-tier professional style APS-C camera. It was released back in 2022, so it's actually a little bit older even than the cheaper R50. But there are several benefits for going with the R10 over the R50, including it's a way better body design. It just feels way better in the hand. It feels like a fuller grip, like you can actually grip this camera all day long, and you're not gonna like get a finger cramp because you can barely fit your fingers on this thing. I just don't love the build of the R50, honestly. You do get the same flip screen and touch screen that you get on the R50 as well with the R10, but one change you do see is we get 2 different dials on the body, so now you can control shutter speed and aperture with a dedicated dial. Rather with the R50, you just get 1 dial on top of the camera, so it's not as intuitive. You do get a 24 megapixel sensor with the R10, and the colors look absolutely beautiful out of this camera. You get that great Canon color science, and with this camera, you can actually shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second, but you do get a pretty big crop in 4K when you shoot at 60 FPS, and then you can shoot in 4K at 24 and 30 frames per second with no crop. It is still that 8-bit sensor, but you can do the same thing where you shoot in that HDR PQ mode in order to get 10-bit color out of your camera, but then you got to do some serious color correcting because of that. So it's sort of a workaround to get 10-bit color in the R10 and the R50. It also shoots at a way faster 15 frames per second with the mechanical shutter for photography. So really the R10 is just sort of a beefed up version of the R50, and you can shoot at 4K at 60 FPS and shoot at faster speeds for photography. I will say though, with that 4K resolution, the R10 does experience pretty bad rolling shutter in 4K. So this is what's going to give you that sort of jello-y looking effect if you're whipping your camera really quickly for moving subjects. This isn't really going to be an issue at all if you're just filming static subjects or filming on a tripod. But if you're a sports shooter or you're shooting moving subjects pretty often, you will notice the rolling shutter in 4K. Also, the R10 can be prone to overheating at around 1 hour in 4K resolution. So even though it doesn't have the 1 hour limit for 4K recording like the R50 does, it still tends to overheat around 1 hour in 4K resolution. So while the R50 lasted around 30 or 40 minutes, this lasts for about an hour. You might be able to use this for a long form YouTube video or a podcast or something. But if it's something you need to record like for 2-3 hours at a time for a really long form video, this is not the camera for you. But at the end of the day, the R10 is sort of a beefed up version of the R50 for still under $1,000. You get really great video quality, good photo quality as well. And if you're a hybrid video and photo shooter, this is probably the best option on our list because you get the best video specs that Canon offers for under $1,000 here. You get a good viewfinder, the pop-up flash for photography, and overall, it's just a really solid camera. Now we have one more mirrorless style camera on our list, and then we'll mention one other camera that you're really going to want to consider. But the last mirrorless camera is the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. This camera is around $998 at the time of recording this video, and this is one of the newest cameras on our list as it was released in 2024. They updated several things in the second version of this camera for content creators who are really wanting to get more professional results out of their budget mirrorless camera. The main benefits that you'll see right away is improved ergonomics. They put a way bigger grip on the ZV-E10 Mark II, and with that bigger grip, they were able to fit in a larger battery. So now this is rocking the Sony NPF Z100 battery in the bottom of the camera. And because they put a bigger battery down here, they also moved the SD card slot to the side of the camera, which is a big improvement over where it was in the first version. It was underneath the battery door, so you had to open the battery door in order to access your SD card. Now you can just get it from the side of the camera, which is a big win. They also updated the sensor in the Mark II, and now you're using the same sensor as the Sony FX30 and the A6700 have, which are much more expensive cameras. I'm actually recording on the Sony FX30 right now. So if I were to plop the ZV-E10 in this exact spot, you would see the exact same image quality. So if you like the way that this image looks right here, then you're gonna like the way the ZV-E10 Mark II looks as well. With that new sensor, you're gonna get 10-bit color just across the board. So you're able to shoot in many different resolutions and frame rates in that 10-bit color, which is gonna give you way better image quality, especially if you're trying to retain better color information out of your video footage. This newer sensor is also gonna give you better performance in lower light situations over the first version of this camera. The original ZV-E10 didn't perform horribly in lower light situations. I mean, it was fine, but this camera performs way better than the Mark I did. Other features with this camera are very similar. You get the fully flip out screen and you get a fully functioning touch screen now. So the first version of this camera only was able to touch focus. Now you can operate all the menus with the touch screen, which is really nice. This camera also now has a dedicated vertical information display. So if you rotate the camera from horizontal to vertical mode, it's going to shift the orientation of your menu to vertical orientation, so you can see your settings a lot better. So this is a really sick feature. It's the first Sony camera to have this feature, and I think it's super helpful. Now, at times, the ZV-E10 Mark II can be prone to overheating, especially in 4K at 60 frames per second. This camera is just so tiny that it's not great at getting rid of the heat that it generates in these higher resolutions and frame rates. So if you're somebody who needs a lot of slow motion footage in that 4K 60 frames per second, this might not be the best fit for you, and you're going to need to spend a little bit more money on something like the A6700 or FX30. And the other con with the ZV-E10 II is it's just kind of expensive at nearly $1,000 for the body only. That's getting pretty up there in price, and some of these other cameras are closer to like $500 or $600. So you are spending quite a bit more to get the ZV-E10 Mark II. I will say it's a better experience than a lot of these other cameras, and the image quality looks outstanding, even as you compare it to some of these other options. So it could be worth it to spend a little bit more and benefit you in the long run. But if you don't have the funds right now to drop $1,000 on a camera, there are some really good options that are cheaper on this list. And the last camera on our list only costs $1 more than the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. And it actually is technically 4 cameras, but also a phone. It's actually the baseline iPhone 16 Pro, which costs $999. It is a serious consideration if you're somebody who's looking at all these different cameras, or you're looking at the ZV-E10 Mark II. You could make a really good case that this is actually a better option for a lot of reasons. So as I said, you do get 4 cameras and lenses with the iPhone 16. You get the main camera, which is a 48 megapixel camera that shoots at 24 millimeters. You get an ultra wide camera that's also 48 megapixels. That's the equivalent field of view of about 13 millimeters. You get a 5x telephoto camera that's around 120 millimeters, I believe, that shoots at 12 megapixels. And then you get a front facing 12 megapixel camera on the front of the screen as well. So you get 4 cameras. That's kind of wild for $999. But you also get a phone, right? So you can use this as a phone. You can use this to browse the internet, to make phone calls, to do all sorts of things. And it's the same price of just getting a dedicated camera like this. Of course, the main benefit to using your phone is just maximum portability and ease of use. This thing fits in your pocket. It's always with you. You can take it wherever you go. And it's basically just point and shoot. And when you're shooting, even in the auto settings with this camera, the results look outstanding. I'm always really impressed with the way that my iPhone looks when I'm out and about making content with it. But a lot of people don't know that you can use your iPhone in some other ways that leverage more advanced features that people might not know about, including shooting in what's called ProRes log. So ProRes is a codec that just is a really high quality codec that retains the most information out of your video file. And when you shoot in ProRes, you can also shoot in the ProRes log format, which is a log video profile, which is sort of a flat profile that you can color correct your image after the fact. And really it just puts the iPhone more in line with what a lot of these professional mirrorless cameras can do, especially like the ZV-E10 that's around $1,000. The image quality looks really similar when you compare these two images. By also leveraging the USB-C slot right here, you could plug in a solid state drive to record video files to an external memory device. So this is really cool to just save yourself space. Now, all of these other cameras use standard SD cards, right? Obviously, that's something we've all used for years. but the iPhones now can attach solid state drives and you can record to SSDs directly, which is really cool. And there's also some third-party apps like the Blackmagic camera app, which allows you to shoot in manual exposure with your iPhone. So now you can adjust some of your settings like aperture and ISO and white balance and even focus. You can manually focus with your phone if you wanted to. So these are a lot of the things that people don't think of when they're looking to buy their first camera. They don't really realize the potential that their phone has to be a professional video creation tool. And the craziest thing about it is you could run an entire YouTube channel just from this single device, right? So for pre-production of a video, you could plan all your video scripts, you could watch competitor videos, you could leverage AI tools like chat with ChatGPT right here to come up with video concepts right there. And then when you're ready to shoot, you could take this out in the field and record with your camera and shoot all of your content. And then you could then edit the video using your mobile editor, something like CapCut. You could use CapCut to edit your video. And then you could upload the video to your YouTube Studio app and even monitor your analytics and your watch time, all of that stuff. This is an all-in-one YouTube Studio solution right here just by leveraging your phone. So for a lot of people, really your phone might be the best option. I personally like to use my phone as a phone and not really use it as a dedicated camera because when I'm out in the field, I like to use my phone for other purposes. But if I was going to choose one camera on this list that might be my personal favorite, it would probably be the DJI Pocket 3 this year. I've just loved using this thing. I think it's such a cool camera, and it's also the most affordable camera on our entire list today. If you think the Pocket 3 is right for you, you should definitely check out these 50 hidden features, settings, and tips that we made about the DJI Pocket 3. So if you want to check out the video, you can click or tap the screen right here, and then we'll see you in the next video.